Welcome back to Sika Strength. A quick note before we start the podcast today. Today's guest is Piet. Piet runs a YouTube channel called Impact Shooting. A lot of you, if you're after seeing him before, you'll have seen him for the videos like Pro Shooter Reacts to Famous Movie Scenes. Piet is like a subject matter expert. We don't really deviate too often from strength and conditioning, but we really wanted to get him on the channel as he's a very, very high performing athlete. If you enjoy these kind of videos, please do put a comment down below and we'll try and get more stuff like this going. We'll have a few more videos with Piet in the next few weeks. One thing to note, our audio, so myself and Owen's audio, does improve at around 3 minutes in. So stay tuned, let us know what you think. Piet, I'd absolutely love to welcome you to the channel. This is Piet from Impact Shooting. For those of you who listen to the YouTube regularly or the podcast regularly, know myself and Owen are deeply interested and somewhat obsessed with the area of shooting, precision shooting, target shooting, and hunting in general. And Piet, for those of you who don't know, is about as much of an expert in this area as you could possibly get. So Piet, welcome to the channel. Welcome to the Republic of Sika Strength. How are you doing today?
Oh man, thanks for the intro. Doing well. Actually heading hunting this afternoon. I'm going to do some wing shooting this afternoon. So super pumped. And way to add a lot of pressure by calling me an expert.
You're looking pretty beefy since we saw you, was it 2 weeks ago?
Yeah,
you're looking jacked.
Yeah.
It's coming into summer, right?
Coming up to beach bod time. And the last time I spoke with my brother about 5 weeks ago, he told me I was fat. And I was like, well, better change things up a bit. One-way ticket to Stretch City, baby, coming up.
Nobody can cut you like your siblings, your brothers.
Exactly.
I imagine sisters are the same.
Exactly.
Yeah, they get you. And they'll say to you, you know it's true, because they won't say it unless it is true, because it hurts the most, you know.
Yeah. They have a way of finding your softest spot.
Yeah.
So, Piet,
I know.
You're kind of like claim to fame, I'd say, or a lot of people, when I bring you up, they say, oh, that's the guy where it's professional shooter reacts to.
Yeah.
Could you tell us what it is? Like, what's professional shooter? What do you do on a daily basis?
So basically, that's a very interesting question. I do everything on a daily basis. Unfortunately, shooting full time doesn't pay the bills, but I'm very fortunate to represent some of the biggest brands in the world when it comes to, making. Actually, the making content is like a bonus for the guys that I work with. But for the most part, it's focused on shooting matches across the country. And it used to be traveling internationally quite a bit to shoot matches. But now with COVID, and you guys will know today's the 1st of December. We've recently been slapped with another stupid, ridiculous lockdown or sort of travel restrictions, if you will, because we have some new variant. So I was planning to go to the US soon to do some shooting that side, but that's been put on the back burner once again. So the last sort of 24 months, basically, or 18 months, we've been just held up here shooting local matches and stuff, but it's still fun.
And Piet, for the people who don't know, what does the shooting you do look like? So it's not like the Olympics where you've one eye covered and you look like a robot and you're shooting something very, very slowly. Tell us what like NRL matches look like.
Oh, it's so funny that you bring up the Olympics thing. I always think it looks like those guys are like in those mental asylum jackets, the straight jackets, because that's what it looks like to sort of take out all the wobble they have. So sort of precision rifle shooting, if you think about it, will usually have multiple targets at different distances, usually starting at about 300 meters, all the way out to 1 kilometer sometimes, and we will generally shoot multiple targets on every stage from different positions under a super tight time limit. So generally it's about 8 rounds to 10 rounds per stage, and there's usually about 4 positions. So you gotta move to get through the whole thing. And the whole challenge there is to sort of mentally focus on what needs to happen so that you've got the right sort of, I don't want to get too technical, but you're making the right decisions. And then also you got to get your body into positions, sometimes contorting and things like that, in order to build a stable enough position to actually take those shots, because we're not lying down on our bellies shooting. We're shooting off dead trees or over tires or cars or whatever the case is. So whatever the match director decides to throw at you, you kind of have to problem solve on the fly. It's super fun.
Nice. One of the one of the explanations of some of those kind of like more extreme rifle shooting matches was it's like the Spartan death race of rifle shooting. So what's some of like the physical stuff you do to prepare for that? You're obviously quite jacked. Myself and Owen were just saying it at the start of the call. What do you do in terms of like your training from day to day?
So I'm always of the mindset that, you know, I want to be fit and healthy, and the fact that it makes me a better shooter is a bonus. But for me, the main reason is, you know, I want to be there long term for my family. Like, I don't want to end up being sort of an overweight 55-year-old, like waiting for his next heart attack. So that's goal number one always. Then mobility-wise,
plenty of those in shooting as well.
Say that again.
There's plenty of those in shooting as well.
Yeah. That is very true, especially because the brandy and Coke goes hand in hand with after shooting. That's sort of the go-to poison here for some gentlemen. Anyway, so the biggest reason, you know, I'll get into sort of specifically what kind of exercises I do, but the biggest reason for me, or benefit that I have found of being in shape, is just the fact that you stay sort of mentally in it for longer. What I found is a lot of times we shoot multiple stages. You know, we generally shoot about 8 to 10 stages. So a stage will have then the different positions and stuff we spoke about over usually 2 days. Okay. Now, generally towards the end of day one, you'll start seeing people make silly mental mistakes and those kind of things. And I found the sort of fitter you are, the better you feel just in everyday life. So that sort of carries over into shooting quite a bit. Also, from a core strength point of view, if you have a solid foundation, it's just so much easier to sort of build positions. And mobility wise, from staying active, you know, I've always had the school of thought, like, you know, you see some people, you know, even, I don't know if you guys can relate to this, but I look at my dad at 50 whatever, and he's like a stiff old man, you know. I don't want to be like that. And I think that starts to happen as soon as you stop moving. So, you know, the little just things like, instead of just like stepping off the pavement, like jumping off the pavement, or those kind of little movements, you stop doing them, and slowly but surely your body goes, we don't need to keep that skill. We'll park that and bring on something else. And then you lose that. So I never want to lose that.
Yeah, definitely. I think the motto of use it or lose it is definitely overused a lot today. But in terms of exercise, as you're starting to get a bit older, as you're starting to get out of your 20s, it's definitely true. So Piet, what's the kind of biggest physical challenge you come up against when you're shooting? Is it heart rate regulation? Is it just being able to hold steady? Or is it a combination of a number of things?
That's a really good question. Probably a combination of the heart rate and holding it steady. There's different techniques you can use to sort of get your rifle as stable as possible. And there's a lot of sort of almost cheat codes that you can use in certain positions where you don't really want to use your muscles to keep your rifle still. You want to use your skeleton. So in other words, if you pictured sort of standing behind a bar stool and you're bending your torso over to like a 90-degree angle, what I try and do, I try and have my legs out as wide as I can. So I'm basically making a large triangle all the way to my pelvis, and then my torso would be bent at 90 degrees. And I'm locking out my knees like backwards. If I wanted to get low enough to shoot and sort of do a squat position, I'd have to sort of hang in no man's land with my squat and try and hold that for, you know, 30 seconds or whatever while I'm trying to engage a target. So if I go sort of with the split stance, if you will, it's just way easier to you know, sort of essentially lean on your skeletal structure instead of trying to muscle through it. And that's, I think, a big mistake a lot of shooters make. Other than that, I mean, we've come up to some pretty physical challenges in the past. You know, some of these matches will have you hiking into the mountains in like 40 degrees Celsius heat, carrying all your stuff. It's a lot of fun. Some of them we had sort of, you know, those crash test dummies that go in the cars, what they do the testing on. We've had some stages where you'd run up to your rifle, shoot 2 rounds, get up, run down some stairs. Like, this is all in the dirt, by the way. I use the term stairs very loosely in this case scenario. Pick up the dummy, carry it about 20 meters, chuck it into its other chair, run back to your rifle, and then basically repeat that as much as you can within the allowed amount of time. Now, The challenge after that is getting back to your rifle. You know, you're super out of breath, you're panting basically, and you got to time your shot essentially. So that's sort of the balance that you got to you got to manage that the whole time. Like, do I run here, or am I going to do a brisk walk because I want to sort of manage my heart rate, but then I'm going to run out of time, so you got to compromise somewhere else. So there's a lot of balls in the air. And I think on the face value, a lot of people don't see that. When they just look at the sport, they think, oh, you know, that looks cool. But there's so much involved in the decision-making process and sort of managing yourself and your time while you're competing. That's why I think it keeps me coming back, because it's something you're never really going to master.
Yeah, it's definitely like all of those things you're saying there. As somebody who shoots a lot, but shooting a lot in like a kind of culling context, those are all skills and they're all decisions you make on like a daily basis. So it's like you have to run back a forestry ride because some group of animals has moved in that direction. You have to figure out if you're going to lie down or take a shot while standing. You then have to figure out, is it better if I run and I'm there for 5 seconds and wait, or is it better if I walk quickly? How do you kind of come up with those decisions during a match? Do you have like a kind of set list of, okay, I know if my heart rate's already this high, I'm not going to run? Or do you say, no, I just always kind of want everything nice and steady? Or do you have like any rules you follow?
Well, another good question, dude. You've got some bangers lined up. So I can absolutely relate to that hunting thing, you know. First of all, we can chat just now about how well this sport sort of translates into hunting, which it really does. But for the most part, so I try and watch what my competition is doing, so what the other competitors are doing, because we don't all shoot at the same time. Every now and again, it's random who starts the stage first when your sort of squad gets there. But for the most part, I'm keeping an eye on what the other guys are doing. I'm sort of taking mental notes, you know, what's working for them, what's not working for them. And then I'll sort of come up with a stage plan. And then really what I'm trying to do is manage my time where I fire that last round with about 7 seconds or so left at the end. So if I've got 90 seconds, at 83 seconds, I kind of want to be done shooting. And the reason I buy myself a little bit of time is if for whatever reason there's a technical issue with my rifle, there's a failure to feed or something like that, I've got a few seconds in the bank to fix and diagnose that problem and potentially put in a fresh source of ammunition or whatever the case may be. But for the most part, I'm always trying to use all the time I have. In the beginning of my sort of shooting career, I was the fast guy. I was trying to burn through stages, but it makes zero sense to get to the end of the stage and you've shot a 6 out of 10, but you did it with 30 seconds left, Woohoo!
Do you find there was a lot of psychological fatigue towards the end of the second day on longer shoots or maybe at more important competitions? Do you find there was a lot of kind of maybe psychological fatigue from the shooting or fatigue from just being, out in pretty warm climate in your gear, trying to concentrate and doing some of this kind of fitness work?
The psychological aspect definitely plays a role. Fatigue-wise, as I said, yeah, for sure. The guys, you sort of get complacent. You've been in it for 2 days and like a little silly mistake will slip in. And at the level we're sort of competing now, you can't make any mental mistakes. There's no room for it. If you make a big mental mistake and you miss 5 rounds as a result of that, you can pretty much pack your stuff away. You're done. Because generally the matches nowadays are won with like 1 or 2 points. Even, and this is kind of a global thing. Most of the guys in the States too. There's a very slim margin at the top there. So you basically have to be perfect. What I struggle with sometimes is I'm like a happy-go-lucky guy, so I don't take it too seriously, so I really don't struggle with the mental thing. But every now and again, somebody will like come over and say like, oh, that gentleman's only, he's only missed twice for the day. And I'm going like, oh, crap, I've also missed twice and I've got 2 stages left and that guy's done shooting, so like, don't mess it up. And that sort of can put unnecessary risk on you, or not unnecessary risk, unnecessary pressure on you. But for the most part, nobody's going to make a living doing this, especially not in South Africa. So at the end of the day, we're here to have fun. I'm shooting basically against myself, and my goal has always been to leave a match not having missed once. I've come pretty close to that twice, but that goal eludes me. Once I do that, I might even call it a day. I don't know. and try something else.
I know in one of your recent rimfire matches, you went 63 out of 64, or something similar to that. That's unbelievably impressive.
Thank you.
Phenomenally
So
impressive. For
Yeah.
what distance?
I've done 62 out of 64 on a center fire match. So that's sort of in terrible conditions.
Nice.
So that was sort of my best sort of real match, if you will. Not that the rimfire match is not a real match, but it's probably a little bit easier.
Pete, one thing I think a lot of people who watch this channel won't be shooters or won't be kind of very actively involved in shooting. One thing I think they definitely could learn from is that kind of like steadiness when they're training, that steadiness then when they go to competition. Another thing I think they could definitely learn from it is how kind of scientific you are about the difference between practicing and physical training. I know you have you have an online shooting school, which I definitely recommend people go and look at. It's definitely on my Christmas list. But can you talk about that, the difference between kind of when you're practicing your skill versus when you're kind of tactically, whether that be changing your own piece of equipment or trying out different positions, and then physical training? Do you combine those things a lot, or do you tend to keep them quite siloed?
I also just have one bit to add to that while you're talking is, when you make these changes and you get frustrated because, sometimes when you're shooting, you're like, I just need to stop and go home. Can you factor in how you deal with that as well? Because I think that would definitely help people understand when you're lifting, some days you're like, fuck this, I just need to stop.
Dude, I had that this morning. I was doing lunges with dumbbells in both hands, and it freaking sucked, man. And I was like, I could just do something that's easy, but then, your body's not going to adapt to that. So I stuck it out and finished the 5 sets. But man, my quads were on fire. It's just terrible. So I try and not overthink it. I find often people, in general, it's like that with specifically to changing your stock. I like just having the ability to be adaptable. So that's why you'll see me changing optics. I'll change chassis systems. Sort of if you think about the piece of wood that was on your granddad's rifle, the new modern rifles have like aluminium chassis. And so I'll swap things in between because I want to be able to be as proficient as I can with multiple systems. I don't want to be put into that box, because at the end of the day, I started this sport to become a better hunter. And I want to be able to just pick up any gun and be able to shoot it really, really well. Then in terms of sort of my training, you guys are asking me some questions here to give away secrets. I'm sure my competition are going to be listening. But yeah, when I go out and train, so pretty much when we get to a match, we usually handed a match book. And in that match book, it'll give you sort of, what distances, what kind of positions you're going to be shooting. And I'll take comprehensive notes in those match books. What's really cool for me is I've been videoing every stage that I've shot pretty much since 2018. So I've got a lot of information on how, where I made mistakes, things that I did really well. And I'll actually go back and look at those and see like, okay, well, if I shoot off these tank traps, I tend to lose some points here. And then I'll go and work on how to shoot tank traps better. What happens if I put my hand here, if I squeeze this, those kind of things. And I'll diagnose that. And I've gotten to the point with most of these obstacles where I open the matchbook. This is something, a little inside trick too. I never look at the matchbook the night before. I wait till we get to the stage, and I'll open the matchbook. I'm like, okay, cool, we're doing this here. That's what we do. Because what I found is the guys going through it the night before, and they go, oh no, there's a 10 centimeter target at 400 meters. How am I going to hit that? And then you're losing sleep over that. Makes no sense. This is still for fun, So we'll figure it out when we get there. It's gotten to the point now where I get to a stage and I was like, that's a banker. And on the sort of prone stuff, which is considered easy for most people, I struggle there because, sort of my competition automatically does better there because kind of everyone can do it. So you'll find that the guys that are really good at reading the wind and that shoot more long-range matches, they'll sort of catch up there, if you will. So what I've started doing is I've started entering more long-range sort of prone matches, which is a completely separate discipline, and then take that skill and the sort of little things that I learn along the way from the people that are really good at doing that, and then applying that to my craft.
You mentioned journaling there, and you have notebooks of what you write in, and on shooting. people will just literally write some calculations, scope setting, stuff like that, and it's called for anyone who doesn't listen, it's called dope in shooting. But in weightlifting and a lot of other sports we deal with, we often encourage people to do journaling, not just record their training sessions, which is obviously very important, but also get people to write down what they were thinking about, what they were feeling about. So when something's going particularly well, they can look back in a year's time and go, oh shit, this is what I was thinking about on this day, let me try this again. Is that kind of what you're doing? Is it a mix of those? Are you adding in like technical cues? Are you adding in feelings? What kind of stuff are you journaling?
That's a very good point. My stepdad taught me something that was really cool when I was young, and his sort of philosophy was, if you want to expect more, you need to inspect more. And that really goes with what you're just saying. The guys in the military also do something called an AAR, an after action report. And that's something that I recently implemented to sort of add more, sort of what you were saying, like what sort of mental space was I in going into this match? How much fatigue was I carrying in the gym? That's why I couldn't, get through my workout. Or what did I eat the day before? Those kind of things are things that I have started taking into account. Especially lately, I've been doing sort of after action reports for my guys on Patreon, and sort of, I don't think the average viewer of the channel wants to know that I struggled to sleep the night before because I left my pillow at home. But it makes a difference, hey? Like, you go into a 2-day match, you fly up the Friday, you don't sleep at all the Friday, you can kind of wing it the next day, but that Sunday, dude, you're struggling if you're not sleeping for 2 days in a row, and it's super mental focus that you need to have. So those kind of things do play a role. Sometimes, as with any sport, there's politics in our sport too. And, there will be a guy there where there's some kind of thing. Like, as soon as you let those things creep into it, it becomes messy. So that's why now I shoot for fun, and then those kind of things really don't play that big of a role anymore.
Pete, sorry. Oh, yeah. Do you want to? So Pete, you just mentioned something pretty interesting there that I'd never thought about. So in terms of like strength training and fitness and all that, people always think about, okay, today I hit a PB and I had 4 jellies and half a waffle before training. Is that something you think about before shooting and competitions, or in general? Do you think, is there foods you've noticed? Is there anything you've kind of pinned together?
So I didn't miss the last part of your question, but with regards to shooting, I try and focus on it one round at a time. To let me know if this answers your question. But so I'm not worried about the bigger picture while I'm doing it. It's not like, when I go into a set at the gym, I'm aiming for 10. I'm not worried about what the total outcome is. I'm worried about doing one perfect rep at a time. If you're working on sort of a cadence, what sort of rate you're pushing the bench press or whatever, or the barbell, that's what I'm focused on while shooting. I'm focusing on all the little things that I need to do to execute one perfect shot. As soon as I've done that, I focus on executing the next perfect shot. And that's sort of my approach to shooting. Even if I miss, you get a bad rep in or whatever the case is, I don't let that affect me at all. Or I try not to while I'm shooting. Maybe after the fact, I'll diagnose a little bit, maybe you're a little bit sloppy on your trigger or whatever the case may be. But as soon as you start losing focus during your set, I don't know if you guys have, try bench pressing and somebody gives you the giggles. Like, all your power just goes, poof, it's just disappears. And the same sort of thing. As soon as you shift that mental focus to what you shouldn't be focusing on, the more mistakes are going to creep in. So I try and just focus on it one round at a time.
Pete, something that if you're used to watching impact shooting, or especially if you watch the hunting videos, it seems like every time you travel, you can't sleep. Yeah. And you talked about it there with your pillow. You're like, if I forget to bring my pillow, we get a huge amount of sleep related queries. Just in like Q&As we do. Obviously, people who are looking to be athletes, sleep is incredibly important. Can you talk through some of the things you do to help you sleep?
Red wine. So yeah, I've always, as a kid, even had a really tough time not sleeping in my own bed. I love being home. I just love sleeping in my own bed, and now it's even worse with like my family. I miss putting my little girl in bed. So all of those kind of things, now it's even worse to go to sleep. And we all know how important it is to get a good night's sleep. When I'm at home, no issues. I used to have major issues back in the day, but now those are kind of resolved. But when I travel, I found even taking like a small dose of melatonin, it makes me super groggy the next day. You know, I'm sort of not mentally switched on, which you obviously need to be in this game. So I've gotten to the point where I've realized that I'd rather be tired than take like artificial sleeping aid. So I'd rather just sort of suffer through it the next day and still be sort of mentally switched on in those 90-second bursts, if you will.
Absolutely. Pete, something that is quite interesting is like the exclusion of stimulants or your specific kind of dietary things around shooting itself. So whether that be hunting or whether it's shooting a match, are there things like you don't drink coffee for a few days or your hydration has to be no, just normal?
How does one not drink coffee for a few days? I'm pretty sure like after you're 13, it's 3 cups a day. No, I don't. I'll probably not drink a Red Bull while I'm on the line, but I mean, I've seen some of the best shooters in the world smash a massive Monster Energy and then 10 minutes later just absolutely crush a stage. So different strokes for different folks. I find that I'm generally tired the day of a shoot if I've traveled. So I'll have like 2 coffees in the morning. I do intermittent fasting, so I wouldn't eat anything until about 12. And then we've sort of shot through most of the day. And the biggest thing for me with shooting, and I see guys doing, I think guys are doing this wrong because nobody's drinking the amount of water that I'm drinking. And if you're not hydrated, it affects your eyesight big time. So at least that's my experience. So I drink a lot of water, and I'll make a conscious effort to sort of extra hydrate the 2 days before and then during a match. I'll consume a lot of water, to the fact that people must think I'm the most nervous shooter ever, because every time they say, Pete, you're up next, I run to the nearest bush to just empty my bladder.
The fasting thing is definitely something I'd find interesting. So most of the shooting we do here is in the morning. It's very, very early in the morning. You're getting up at 4:30, 5 a.m. And intermittent fasting or fasting is like, it's very much an environmental thing of you don't eat because you get 10 minutes extra in bed. You hop into the Jeep and you go, and then you end up eating at like 11 or 12 in the morning. But one thing I do notice is on the mornings when I eat very, very early, I tend to lose concentration, or something happens where it might get to 9:30 a.m. or 10 a.m. and then suddenly I get that kind of drop in concentration. Do you ever come up against that, or is that something that intermittent fasting was ever handy for?
I haven't really experienced that myself. You know, I've been doing intermittent fasting long since before it was cool, and that was largely due to necessity, because I used to run out of time. You know, I worked a corporate job in finance, and I'd be at the office very early in the mornings, and I just wouldn't eat. And I think my body personally is fine with it. I do notice I start noticing the hunger from about 11:30. But for the most part, I mean, most people, unless you're doing something super physically demanding, like riding a Tour de France stage, you can make it to 12 at least without eating in the morning. Like, you don't need the calories.
Yeah.
So, that actually, Pete, so that brought something we want to talk about, and I think people obviously, if they don't watch your channel, wouldn't be aware of, but you used to be quite a consistent cyclist. Can you talk a little bit about that, how you got into it, what it was like? And you were also working a full-time corporate job, as you mentioned before. Can you talk a little bit about how you're balancing the volume of training you needed for cycling and also working quite an intense job by the sounds of it?
Yeah, and that's something people don't realize, hey, that endurance sport, the sort of hours in the saddle or on the road or in the pool or whatever your discipline is, it's a very difficult thing to manage if you've got sort of a 9 to 5. Luckily, I didn't have really a 9 to 5, even though I was working full time. I was a financial advisor earning commission only. So, you know, if you ain't working, you ain't getting paid. So I was able to juggle that quite successfully and spend a lot of time on my bike. Some weeks I'd be on my bike for like 27 hours a week. So more than a full waking day, I'd be riding my bicycle. Obviously, with regards to how we're sort of riding, that's a completely different discussion. Most people overdo it with training, as you guys probably know, and they don't realize the benefit of slow and easy. You know, gets a lot done. Anyway, so how I was juggling that is I'd usually wake up pretty early in the morning, go for like a 2-3 hour ride, do some interval stuff, then go to work, smash a few meetings, and I'd generally be out of there at about 2 o'clock, and then go do some form of either it's a skills-based mountain bike training or something like that, or I'd go for like a nice, slow, easy ride on my road bike in the winds of Durbanville, which is not fun. You might as well go kite surfing.
Kite surfing at altitude as well.
For sure. So in terms of just managing that, I always told myself, and I have that same mindset now, I don't put on my, at that time in my life I was wearing a suit and a tie, but I never want to get dressed and then mess about. So when I go to work, and I get more done in 2 hours than most people get done in their whole day, because I'm laser focused on what I'm busy with. And I think even now with what I'm doing with the YouTube channel and stuff, the YouTube channel is good. We've got 112,000 subscribers. If you don't subscribe, please subscribe to Impact Shooting. Thank you very much. Shameless plug. And, I do that. We've got an online store. We've got multiple businesses running. So I'm doing a lot. And the reason I'm able to do that and spend more time than ever with my family is because I'm super focused when I sit down to do something.
Piet, I think this is something, I know Owen will do it a lot as well, but when we're working one-on-one with athletes, or if we're in a consultation with an athlete, a lot of the time you're not cleaning up, but you're helping to organize the other shit that happens around their life, not so much their training. Like you're saying, what times do your university classes finish? What days at the weekend do you work? When you're organizing out your day, do you have a diary that you write everything into, or is it kind of all up here?
It's a bit of both. So I generally have, next to my computer, I've got a massive whiteboard. I love whiteboards. So I've got a whiteboard over there, which is out of frame. I've got a whiteboard in my computer. I've got a whiteboard upstairs in my house, and I've got a whiteboard in our shop. So wherever I am, I've got a whiteboard on my phone with like the Notes app. So I'll generally have like a little to-do list of things that I need to tick off that day. I sometimes get very frustrated if I don't tick all the things off for my day. And then I've got sort of the average things we need to do. When it comes to my workouts and stuff, they're scheduled, they're planned, and they're in my diary every day. How many reps of what with sort of there's lots of apps where you can do those kind of things. So that's sort of where I am with that. Shooting wise, I used to have a range really close to my house, and I try and get there like multiple times a week. That's no longer an option, but I'm trying to at least do some form of shooting training once a week at this point.
Piet, I think it's interesting on this so obviously it's a very specific skill. You're shooting a rifle. There's a host of things that go into it, but it's very, very specific. Unless you're dry firing, you're only going to be firing that rifle at a range or wherever your competition is or wherever you're hunting. I think people have come up against this more with their kind of actual training in the last few years, where because of COVID or because of multiple things, they're having to put their specific skill of snatches, clean and jerks, back squats aside, and then when they're at home, they do their general training. They might be going for a jog, they might be doing a mobility piece at home. Is there things you do at home or when you're away from the range? Obviously you do your gym work and stuff like that, but is there kind of skill specific things that you do away from the gun that help you with your actual skill itself?
Not really. I probably should be. In the past, I used to do a lot of dry fire. Like I would dry fire, and for your audience that's not familiar with shooting, dry fire is basically taking your rifle and pretending to shoot it by aiming at something. So everything's the same. The only thing that doesn't happen is you don't put any ammunition in. So instead of your rifle going bang, it'll just make a little click sound with the firing pin sort of dropping after you squeeze the round. I used to do a lot of that. I don't do that anymore because honestly, first of all, I'm going to be dead honest. I don't have the drive. The time is just an excuse that I make. If I really wanted to do it, I'd make the time. But where I am now in my shooting journey, I would much rather play with my little girl at night than, dry fire for 20 minutes. Because even though I work from home, that's what you guys see behind me for the guys watching on YouTube. I spend my whole day down here. My little girl doesn't see me until I go up the stairs at 6 o'clock tonight. So, it priorities. Yeah. It depends where you are in life, A couple of years ago, before she was born, I would be dry firing from 6 to 6:30, every day. What's cool about that is you basically go on autopilot. When you get to a match, everything just clicks. and you're in the zone easier. And I do find nowadays when I go to a match, I have to work a little bit harder to still win. But, you know, it is what it is.
I think that's quite funny. Like I've training, like you just released a video yesterday on training rifles. So I've 2 training rifles and a proper rifle, all set up identically. 3 of them are in the same stock. They're all same heights. All these things are identical. I've shot out 2 barrels and just shot 1 rifle out fully in those rifles. And it's honestly something we were thinking about last week. Is I don't know if I'll ever have time to fully shoot that out again, like or have the same level of aggression when going to rage every single day.
It's just priorities change in life, you know. And what's really cool about that is, I mean, if you've sort of built up that muscle memory, you can get away with not doing the kind of volume anymore, you know. It's sort of like, you know, if a client of yours was in a calorie deficit, you know, you'd be in that deficit for some time to hit your goal, and then you can sort of go back to maintenance. So let's just say that we're on maintenance mode at the moment.
Yeah, I think that's definitely characteristic of younger athletes, is they'll push too far, or in any endeavor they'll just go too far, and you'll realize, oh, I didn't need to do that much stuff. Like you find the kind of the most efficient, like you can have an effective amount of training, or like the efficient amount, and the effective amount is definitely doing more than you'd ever need to, and then the efficient amount is just doing enough, you know. And then that's probably a similar attitude. Like you probably don't need to dry fire for 30 minutes every day anymore, realistically, after so many years.
I used to go hard at the dry fire thing, man. I would have my skipping rope, and I'd have a punching bag, and I would alternate skipping rope, punching bag, dry fire, skipping rope, punching bag, to the point of like exhaustion. Like if I put my face on the gun, the sweat's running off my head and like dripping off the side of the gun. Like that's the kind of level I was dry firing at. And then I'd obviously get my like physical workout in. And the big thing is there, your heart rate's through the freaking roof. So if you can shoot well or dry fire well in those conditions, man, you're going to crush it when you get to a match. Now, I haven't done that in the last 3 years, but that's what I used to do. And I've reaped the benefits of that, you know. I put in the work, and I won most of the big competitions that I wanted to win. There's a couple of that have still eluded me, but we'll get there. And if I don't, that's also okay, because it's not my goal anymore. My goal is to grow my business now more than it is to you know, win shooting matches.
Piet, so that's kind of something that's kind of very, very important, I think, and maybe pivot towards this a little bit, is that you said you started target shooting for hunting, you know, and myself and Fitz are very avid hunters. And can you just kind of describe a little bit why it's so important that you need to be on top of your game when you're hunting, you know, when you're hunting animals, and you're coming from the most ethical part of hunting as possible, and you're coming from you want to get this done with the most efficient way possible?
So for me, my first hunting experience ever as a kid was in Namibia with my dad. I don't know exactly how old I was, but they basically talked me into a shot. And I mean, we were shooting my dad's rifle every now and again on the farm, but we weren't what you call proficient. And the very first animal I ever shot, and I'm actually going to do a specific episode on this pretty shortly, is I wounded that animal. And that sort of put me off hunting for a very long time. You know, I didn't want to do it. And then when I got into rifles and stuff, the idea of eating meat that I harvested just was so much more appealing than my wife running down to Woolworths and emptying my bank account. I'd much rather have a cool experience doing that. And sort of, you know, when I invite people over for a braai, which is a barbecue, you know, they'd know, like, oh, Piet, this is that kudu you shot, you know. And we've seen the video, and it's so much more powerful. So I really wanted to be in the position where when I had a rifle in my hands and an animal in my crosshairs, that I knew with the highest possible percentage of probability that I was going to make an ethical, clean kill shot. And that's why I started shooting competitions to the degree that I did. Got a little sidetracked there for a while, focused too much on the competitions and sort of put the hunting thing on the back burner for probably a year or so longer than I should have. But I'm very fortunate that since I started doing that, I haven't ever wounded an animal. And for those of you guys that hunt, you know it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. It's like riding a motorbike to work. It's going to happen. You just don't know when. But if it does happen, at least I know that I've given myself all the tools possible to make a very quick follow-up shot or do what I need to do in order to get that animal on the ground. So that's sort of my mindset when it comes to that.
I think that's definitely a very common thing in hunting is like the neck or head versus the kind of body shot, what we call it here, due to the people we were kind of trained by over here, and then Garth coming in with us in our group. Everything here is neck, stroke, head. It's because of the environment. Something shot in the chest will run 50 meters, 100 meters, and it just so happens that 50 or 100 meters in where we're hunting tends to be into very, very thick cover, and it's never ever found. I think there's like a level of kind of ethics that comes into, or a cost benefit analysis that comes into that, where people don't necessarily have the rifle that can shoot a half MOA, so that's a half-inch group at 100 meters. Some people might not have their rifle, some people might not have the time to do that, or else they're just kind of going to shoot 1 or 2 animals a year and get into it. Is there any piece of advice you'd have for people like that, Piet, who are kind of, they're not the target shooters, they're the kind of weekend hunters? What should they be doing to kind of change their game to get better at hunting, to get better at shooting?
First of all, subscribe to my YouTube channel. I think that you're going to learn a lot there.
And by the shooting school,
that too.
Definitely go to that.
We can make a promo code for your listeners if anybody would be interested.
That'd be great.
And so, yeah, to answer your question, if you want to sort of develop your skill, as with anything, just show up, find a local match. I know the Precision Rifle Series are active in Europe. Show up, just go look for the day. You're going to learn so much. I'm sure some of the guys will let you take a crack or two with their rifles. It is such a cool sport, and it translates so well into hunting. If not that, and you don't necessarily have the financial resources, because let's be honest, it's not the cheapest hobby in the world to do this, just, I don't know, use your rifle a little bit more. If you're planning on going hunting, don't be the guy to buy a box of ammo the week before you're going to go hunting, sight in your rifle and use the remaining amount of ammo to try and kill something. That's not awesome. As far as there is another thing that's sort of creeping up lately, and I see that in my comments, especially if I do Q&A videos, it's like guys ask, is a 243 Winchester, adequate for long-range hunting? If you've got to ask, then it's not, long-range hunting's not for you, okay, because you don't know enough. Yeah. So if you need to ask that question, then that's sort of a general no, don't do that. For me, with what you were saying earlier with body shots and stuff like that, the only time I'll really take a body shot is if I wanted to, do the whole wall mount thing like you guys have behind you. But my wife's like, no. That was part of our agreement, this whole thing. Maybe one day if I have a studio like Joe Rogan, then maybe. So I'm keeping them. They're just at the taxidermy, but they're not coming home. But for the most part, I hate that feeling when I shoot something. And then when I started hunting, I was shooting body shots because, you're not confident. Even though you could hit a steel plate at that distance that's half the size of the animal's head. There's a difference when you're shooting an animal. There's consequences, It can just turn its head like this very slightly and, the shot zips by it. So when you take those body shots and they take off running and they run, whether they run 100 meters or 50 meters, just the fact when you see it run, it's not a good feeling. So, I try and shoot them in the head, hey? Just have it over with instantly.
Piet, could you kind of give a synopsis of the hunting situation in South Africa, how it is, maybe some of the pros and cons you find of it, and from our point of view, like some of the pros are the enormous ranges you've got going, like some ranges half the size of our county we're sitting in here at the moment, to kind of be roam around in, which we're pretty jealous of, I suppose. Yeah.
So hunting in South Africa, we're extremely blessed with a massive variety of animals that we can harvest, and most of them are freaking delicious, which is a plus. In terms of land, sort of all the land is privately owned here. There's no such thing as in the States, the guys shoot on public land. That doesn't happen here. So basically you go to an outfitter or a farmer, a boer, and he says, right, this is what my animals costs, and at certain trophy levels, maybe that's the same here, but at Roland Ward levels, the price jumps substantially. So you got to make sure what you're doing. You might have budgeted for $6,000 and it's 20 grand. Okay, so you got to have your wits about you. But yeah, we're super blessed with sort of the type of hunting we can do here. I really like doing the walk and stalk hunting, but there's a bunch of people that are quite content to, sit on the back of the truck, drive around. Oh, cool, impala off the back of the truck, no problem. And that's fine too, different strokes for different folks. For me personally, I just like that sort of idea of making it a little bit harder and sort of more authentic. But that's my personal opinion. If I really wanted to do that, I guess I should run it down like they did back in the old days and kill it with a spear. But that's not happening because I've had like some ankle replacements and knee operations.
Piet, in a kind of broader sense, if you could like explain what life is like in South Africa at the moment, like I know you're living in Cape Town, kind of like what the country is going through. I know there's a bit of unrest out there.
So we're pretty chilled at the moment. There was quite a bit of unrest recently, but South Africa, with all the issues we do have, I think the news makes it way worse than it is. This is a wonderful place to live. I stay in Cape Town, which is kind of, okay, I'm going to be specific. Cape Town is a wonderful place to live. The rest of the country, sorry for the rest of the South Africans listening to this, but there's no way in hell I'm staying in Johannesburg. I have the sea down here. It is so beautiful. When I wake up in the morning, it's a paradise here. We have some political issues. We've got rolling blackouts, all of those things, and we've got silly COVID travel bans. But other than that, life's pretty good here, man. Everything's relatively affordable. For you guys in Europe, you come over here. The American guys with the exchange rate, man, you'll live like a king and it'll cost you nothing. Most of my friends that come here from the US, like we go out for supper and it's like, first of all, the food is amazing. I've traveled the world. Nobody, and probably every guy says that about their own country, but our food here is unbelievable. The quality of the food, the service is not always the best in the restaurants, but man, the food is unbelievable. And then when the bill comes and my US friends or Europe friends, they see what it costs and they do the conversion, they like burst out laughing. Because like a family of 4 has just gone out for supper and we've had wine and desserts and everything, and it'll cost like what a meal would cost for one person in their country. Yeah, it's crazy, yeah.
So Piet, one thing we touched on, and this is a bit of a terrible segue basically, and I was just reminded by looking at your chassis on the wall behind you, one thing I am really interested to ask you about is you're a sponsored athlete. So we see like sponsored athletes in other sports. You'd see CrossFitters only wearing Reebok shoes. We'd see rugby players only wearing Adidas boots or whatever it is. There's definitely a bit of a conflict for you, or I could foresee a conflict for you where you're a Vortex optics shooter. Does it ever come to the point where, and obviously don't name names here, but where Vortex send you something and you're like, I'm not using that this year, or oh, I really want to use the old style chassis. Is that ever something, or is it like, obviously you're working with great companies, but does that conflict ever come up?
So you made 2 good points there. First of all, I work with only companies that all the companies I work with is a company where I've literally opened up my wallet and bought their product first. Okay. So I believe in the brand, and I think that's very important, and that brings a lot of authenticity to, what I do. I'm not a sellout in the sense that, hey, I was shooting XYZ, now X company came along and said, we want you to shoot this. And now the other thing is now trash. That's not the case scenario. The good news is I've got incredible relationship with these companies that I work with, and they would never say, and I would never even sign a deal like that to say, hey, this is what you're shooting for the year. They don't tell me what to do at all. So they say, hey, Piet, this is how we can support you. Which product and how you decide to use them is 100% up to you. And that's what's really cool. So it also gives me a little bit of flexibility. I can chop and change between any of these things you see behind me. Whatever I feel like running for the weekend or the day when I go shooting, it's all up to me, which is really, really cool.
Piet, do you think you have any advice for someone who's trying to go the route you've gone? So you've left a, I suppose, stereotypical corporate job, office job, 9 to 5, whatever. As you say, you'd kind of different hours, but the gist is the same. Do you have any advice for someone going the direction you've gone, you know, with YouTube, your own business? Is there any things you're like, fuck, if I knew that from day one, this would have been a lot smoother?
Yeah, I mean, you guys have recently done the same. Congratulations to both of you. It is, I think it just comes down to adding value. If you add value to other people's lives, whether it's a company you're working with, in my example, Vortex MDT, you know, those kind of guys. If I add value to them and I add value to the people that watch my channel, that's why. So I make, even though I make shooting videos, for the most part, I think I'm an educational channel because I teach people how to shoot better, how to use their gear better. And that's sort of the goal with my channel and my life really, is to sort of share what I've learned along the way. And I think we're so blessed with modern technology and stuff that we can actually do that. So my biggest key takeaway would be is just to add value, whether it's, you know, to your current company you're working for, or you want to start your own business. Find something where you can make a difference in somebody else's life. And then our world is pretty big. There's going to be a lot of people that'll like that.
I think that's great advice.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people really want the end product of kind of working for yourself, or having a YouTube channel, or having the relationship like you'd have with your sponsors, but the bit in between is what they miss. Like they have the desire, they know what they want at the end of it, but it's like that thing of you have to add value, or there has to be an educational component is definitely really, really important.
Like I got an email last week somewhere, because I have a little company that sells, you know, we sell some scopes and stuff. And the email was like, first of all, the English was horrific, so it was probably not an English person that wrote the email, but like, hi, I'm in XY country, you know, send me one of your old scopes so I can shoot with it. And I'm going like, yeah, what am I getting out of this, you know? Because at the end of the day, this is still capitalism, right? There needs to be an exchange of value. So that's very important if you're pursuing, whether you want to get sponsored by a supplement company or whatever the case may be, you know, add value so that they can actually, like, they need to do the calculation. Is it worth it to back you, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's great advice. Piet, in terms of adding value and not taking up too much of your valuable time, I think that's probably a good place to end the podcast. I'd really like to thank you for coming on. Thanks for having a great channel, and for definitely teaching myself and teaching Owen a lot. And
awesome,
thanks for your
gentlemen.
time.
It's a pleasure.